In the last video, you created accounts with both GitHub and Heroku. Now, in the end of the day, both of those tools, they need access to our project code. Heroku is going to need access to the project code so it can actually deploy our Node applications, and GitHub needs access to the project code so it can show it on the project homepage, allowing us to collaborate with others, track code changes over time, or manage issues in our application. Either way, we need a reliable way to get our code to both of those services. Now, the answer is not to just zip up the folder and send it off to those services. The answer is to use version control with Git. In this video, we're going to talk about what version control is and what Git is. We'll get Git installed, and that's going to allow us to actually use it in the next video. To get started, let's talk about what exactly version control is. Version control allows you to manage the versions of your application over time. So imagine the web server project. As we add new features or change code, with version control, we can track those changes. We can create what are essentially save points along the way for the various versions of our application. Now, why is that useful? Well, imagine you had an application and you had 1,000 users who were paying you for that app. You want to add a new feature to give your users something new and exciting. So you make some changes to your project and you deploy it. Now let's say that you discover that something's wrong with that new feature. There's a bug. So what do you want to do? You want to revert to the previous working state. Then you want to spend a little more time working on that new feature. And when it's ready and the bug is fixed, you'll deploy it back to your users. That's a very simple workflow, but without version control, you're not going to have an easy way to revert back to a previous working state of your application. The only version of the project you have is the broken one, your locally saved files. Unless you have a picture-perfect memory and a lot of spare time on your hands, you're not going to be able to revert the application back to its previously working state. With version control, you could do that in about a second. So without version control, you are living on the edge. If anything goes wrong, it's going to be a big problem. You're going to have to manually work with all of these files to figure out what went wrong, or you're going to have to rewrite them if they get lost. With version control, you're in the clear. You can experiment and try different ways to approach problems. If solution 1 doesn't work, you can revert those changes in a second, and you can try to approach the problem from a different angle. It gives you flexibility and confidence knowing you can experiment with your code, but always get back to that working state you had before without wasting your time and energy. You should be using version control for every personal and professional project you're working on. If you're willing to spend time writing code, it's best to spend an extra 10 seconds to integrate version control, allowing you to track those version changes over time and manage your application code with ease. Now, in this course, we'll be using the Git version control system. There are other version control tools out there, but Git is by far the most popular and the most widely used, and for a good reason. It's super fast and easy to work with, and you can use Git regardless of the programming language you're working with. You could use Git with Java, with an iPhone application, or in our case, with Node.js. We can install and learn more about Git over in the browser. I'm going to change the documentation URL over to git-scm.com. Here, there are a ton of great resources that teach you how to use Git that will cover the basics in the class. And here we can also install the Git tools, allowing us to integrate version control into our programming projects. Right here, you should see the installer for your operating system. Here I have the installer for Mac. And down below, I just want to point you to one more resource. There is a book called ProGit. It's a free book and it's available to read right here on the Git website. I definitely recommend checking it out as you continue on with your development career. If you move into any real development position, they're going to be using Git most likely, and knowing how Git works is going to allow you to get up and running quickly. For now though, let's go ahead and just grab the installer so we can use Git in our project. This is going to download what you need in order to get the tools set up. And once again, this is going to give us access to something new from the terminal. It looks like the download hasn't started. I can always click there to manually grab it from sourceforge.net. And once we do have it installed, We'll explore the very basics throughout the next several videos. Down below, it is indeed downloading what we need. I'm going to go ahead and run the installer for my operating system, and once again, this is one of those click next installers. If you're on Windows though, at some point throughout the options menu, it's going to ask you if you want to install something called Git Bash. You have to check that option. If you don't, you're going to have to reinstall Git later in the course to get access to Git Bash. This is going to allow you to perform some operations that you would otherwise not be able to perform on Windows. So once again, for Windows users only, make sure to check the option in the installer that installs Git Bash. Right here, I'm on a Mac. I'm going to double click that installer. Actually, I need to right click it and click open so I can verify that I want to install this software from the web. And once again, as mentioned, this is just the type of installer where we click next a few times. Unless you're on Windows, make sure to check the Git Bash installation option. Now, once things are done, we're going to go ahead and restart the terminal once again from Visual Studio Code, and we're going to make sure everything got installed correctly. I'm going to trash the installer. I'm going to head over to Visual Studio Code. I'll use the trash can to close the terminal, then I'll open up a new one. Right here, terminal, new terminal. From here, we're going to use git, which is the command we got access to when we installed Git. We'll be using all sorts of git commands throughout this section and throughout the rest of the class. All we're going to do in this video is make sure it installed correctly by checking the version we have installed on our machines. That is git space -- version. If I run this, it's going to print the version of Git I have installed, which is 2.19.2. Now, the exact version of Git you're using is not particularly important, as long as you're using v2 or greater. If you're seeing v0 or v1 as that first number, that's a problem, though you shouldn't be seeing that as you just installed the tool. So right here, we do indeed have Git installed correctly, and throughout this section, we're going to start to put our project under version control to keep track of its changes over time. Then we're going to be able to take those changes and we're going to be able to send them off to the GitHub servers and the Heroku servers by running commands from the terminal. That is how we're going to send our code off to those third-party services. Now, we're going to talk more about what Git is and how it's going to work for our application files in the very next video. I'm excited to get to that, so let's go ahead and jump right in.